All right, maybe we'll give like 10 more seconds. All right, Monique, are you able to show the results now?
Yeah.
Great. And also just, oh, great. Thanks so much, Melanie. Hopefully that's a little better. And also just as a reminder, some folks are introducing themselves in the chat box. If you can make sure that your introduction goes to the panelists as well as attendees. I see that some of the introductions are only to the panelists. Great. And Monique, were you able to show the results? I don't see them on my end, but I assume that perhaps everyone else sees them.
I can see them on my screen. I'm hoping others can as well.
Okay. And is it possible just to kind of provide us with a little overview of the results?
Sure. So in the first question, are you involved in prosecutorial accountability work in California, and what are your barriers? 47% said, yes, all in, I'm currently funding this work. 13% said we have 1 foot in the door, but still have some questions. 33% said, sigh, trying to figure out how to make this part of my portfolio. And 7% said, unfortunately, no, I can't get my board behind this. So yeah, exciting to see that a large, or at least 47% of you said you are currently funding this work, and that sounds like there's still more to be learned. And then in terms of, are you currently doing C4 funding? 53% said yes, currently doing C4 funding. 13% said no, but interested in C4 funding, and 33% said no, and we currently do not have capacity for C4 funding.
Great. Thanks so much, Monique. So let me go ahead now and introduce today's featured panel speakers, who are all key activists in the California movement. We have Ana Zamora, who's the Criminal Justice Policy Director for ACLU of Northern California, and Ana is also the campaign manager for their new Meet Your DA campaign, which is at meetyourda.org. We also have Tamisha Walker, who is founder and executive director of Richmond-based Safe Return Project. We have Ann Irwin, the vice president of J.K. Irwin Foundation, and also the founder and executive director of Smart Justice California. And then lastly, we have Nicole Boucher, strategist for the California Donor Table and the Progressive Air Project. So I'm going to start with Ana, who's with the ACLU of Northern California. And Ana, you just recently launched the Meet Your DA campaign. Can you tell us more about this campaign? Why district attorneys, and what do you hope to accomplish with this campaign?
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I can no longer see the notes, or excuse me, the comment, or what do you call that? The message box. Just so if there's anything I need to know, please let me know.
Okay.
So hi everyone. This is Ana from the ACLU. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks so much for everybody who helped organize this, and for all of you for listening in today. So I'm going to kind of provide a little bit of context to why we should care about DAs if we care about criminal justice reform. And I'm going to go into that very briefly, just so we're kind of all on the same page, because I know there's some folks that are maybe new to this idea of focusing in on prosecutors, and others of you are very, very well steeped in the issue. So I just want to provide a little bit of context. And then I want to kind of introduce you all to the new campaign, the Hey, Meet Your DA campaign, and the primary components of the campaign, which includes some new digital assets, which I'm going to share with you today and run through with you. So yeah, I'm just going to jump right in. So sorry, let me see if I can navigate here. Okay, so why district attorneys? So, you know, just as Catherine said, district attorneys are some of the most powerful elected officials. And the problem is most voters don't understand what a DA is. their power or who their district attorney is. So why are DAs powerful? District attorneys really have the sole discretion in an individual criminal case to decide when criminal charges are filed against an individual and what charges to file. In addition, they have vast powers because of this. They're, I would argue they have the power to resist the discretion in individual cases. They do have the power to end mass incarceration, or at least they have the power to get involved a lot more and to help curb the trend toward mass incarceration. They have the power to lead a progressive state and local criminal justice agenda. And this elected office is oftentimes a stepping stone for higher office. And I think Senator Kamala Harris, is a perfect example of that, that we should be mindful of. So this is just very, very broad overview of some of the powers. We could spend an hour on this, but we're not. We're going to move on to the opportunity that we have in California. As Catherine said, in 2018, in the June primary, 56 of 58 district attorneys are up for election. So this is the prime opportunity to educate voters, to engage different community groups across the political and nonprofit spectrum on why we should all care about who our district attorney is. We should be challenging our district attorney to make sure that they're actually upholding our values in and out of the criminal justice system, and a great opportunity to really make some change in leadership. In addition, we have another really important opportunity in California around the fact that our electorate voters are showing that they're well primed on criminal justice reform. And that's evidenced by the passage of Proposition 36 in 2012 to reform 3 strikes, Proposition 47, which changed some felonies from some crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, Prop 57, which dealt with juvenile justice issues and parole reform, and then the legalization of marijuana with Proposition 64. These are huge, amazing reforms that we have passed because the voters have approved them. And on this screen, I have Proposition 47, and which leads me into the third reason why this is so important, is because district attorneys continue to be one of the primary oppositions to these great kind of reforms that we're pushing at the ballot box as well as in the state legislature. They, as you can see by this slide, even though 60% of the vote, 60% passed this initiative, Proposition 47, only 2 district attorneys supported it at the time, and that was the district attorney of San Francisco and Santa Clara counties. We would like to see our elected officials actually standing up for reforms that they know their constituents are likely to approve. In addition, we think there's an opportunity here because we have faith that district attorneys can be different, that they can and they should be vehicles for social change. And the only way that's going to happen is if we put pressure on them to do so. And then most importantly, this is a strategy that's working across the country. We are seeing elected prosecutors standing up and taking a different tune. They're rejecting tough on crime and they're supporting communities. This is Baltimore State Attorney Marilyn Mosby, who has been kind of speaking out on a number of different issues. This is just one example of a news article about how prosecutors are fighting the Trump administration around immigration issues. Here is newly elected state's attorney in Cook County, Illinois, Kim Foxx, who ran on a reform platform. She won, beating an incumbent. And then, once she assumed office, she starts to challenge some of the biggest issues facing Cook County, one of which being officer-involved shootings. Then we have Larry Krasner, who won the Philadelphia District Attorney's race. Talk about a progressive platform. He actively campaigned about being against the death penalty and vowed not to seek the death penalty if he won. Absolutely said, I will uphold the rights and protect the rights of all people, including people who protest. He's known in his career for defending Black Lives Matter protesters, as well as getting involved in officer-involved shooting investigations and things like that, representing individuals and families, and he won. This is a huge, huge kind of sea change that we're seeing across the country, and our goal is to see the same type of sea change here in California. So that leads me to the new Meet Your DA campaign. This campaign has been a long time in the making, and we officially launched, 3 weeks ago now. And the campaign contains 3 primary pieces, all of which are, I would say, are critical to the success of this work. One, and this is, I think, the most important piece, is the network of local partners. And I'm going to get into that in the next slide. 2, it's the public education campaign. California is a big state. We have a lot of voters. We have a lot of incredible organizations that do criminal justice reform work, as well as political engagement work. All of these people need to be brought up to speed and engaged in a way that will sustain through the election into holding district attorneys accountable after the election. So launching a statewide public education campaign and engagement campaign is really, really important to creating an infrastructure where we can hold hold district attorneys accountable in and out of the election. And then third, this is the leadership issue. We must think about how to create a long-term pipeline of a new kind of leader in the district attorney's offices, leaders that are committed to ending mass incarceration, committed to tackling and ending racial disparities in the system. In order to do that, we need to start from the very beginning and kind of change the narrative that district attorneys are necessarily tough on crime, that their job is necessarily to send people to prison. We want to push back on that, challenge it in the hopes of creating a pipeline where a more diverse group of people decide to dedicate their career to being district or prosecutors and then maybe running for office someday. So the first component is the network. So I want to focus first on this local leaders piece. Part of the Meet Your DA campaign is a recognition that while this campaign is about achieving reforms at the statewide level as well as the local level, these are inherent. Doing district attorney work necessarily means you're doing local work. And doing local work should be done by local leaders who have been impacted the most by mass incarceration. And so what we did is we spent about 1.5 years reaching out to our partners, our local partners, our criminal justice partners, and kind of, taking their temperature about their interest in having a more focused campaign on their locally elected district attorney, and kind of changing the narrative around the DA and getting more and more of their own membership, as well as growing their local coalitions to do more focused work on the DA. And so after about 1.5 years of taking a lay of the land and reaching out to our partners, we decided that the way to do this is by creating a network and working in as many counties as we could, and then recognizing that local leaders often don't have enough resources to take on a whole new project above and beyond the incredible work that they're already doing, that it was really important that we resource this work. So we have issued sub-grants to all of these local partners, which means that we are working in Sacramento. We are right now implementing local campaigns in Sacramento County, Alameda, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, San Joaquin, Fresno, Kern, Riverside, San Bernardino, Orange, and San Diego counties. These counties represent a diversity of geography. They represent different kind of political landscapes. Some counties are far more progressive. Some of these counties will have contested races in 2018, while others won't. But the common denominator for all of these counties is that there's a fantastic group that is engaged, connected to this statewide campaign, have been issued resources, and are currently implementing campaign plans that they have drafted. And we're really lucky today to have one of these local leaders on the phone, Tamisha Walker from the Safe Return Project, and she's going to be talking in a moment when I shut up about the work she's doing in Contra Costa. In addition, this work is also connected to a national effort dedicated to having a more focus on prosecutors. And so I just wanted to note some of the other organizations, both in the national context as well as within California, such as Pico, California, who are actively engaged in the 501c3 parts of this work, as well as the 501c4 and the electioneering parts of this work. This is truly a movement we're trying to build, and so I wanted to make sure that you guys are getting a glimpse of just how robust this, coalition is. So next, I wanted to give you a brief intro to the digital, kind of the public education components of this campaign, which are really, really critical. Voter engagement work is difficult, and we have the added hurdle of this being a down ballot candidate. However, because nobody knows about the DA, we have the benefit of education without having to do persuasion. So voters don't come to the DA's race with preconceived notions, really, or I guess to a lesser extent than other political issues. So we really have the benefit of being able to communicate and mold voters, which is great. So let me find where I am here. I'm going to share another screen with you now. Here we go. All right. So can you guys see a new screen now? Did that work? Oh, can somebody just give me a thumbs up? Or
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So this is the new website that we launched 3 weeks ago. I'll play the video in a moment, but I wanted to run through the website first to explain the rationale behind all of these elements, all of which were carefully crafted and based on the first ever message testing that we did in California. We did a poll, a robust poll back in March, to kind of gauge voter attitudes around district attorneys, and all of that research was used to kind of inform this website. So the first thing is the name, Meet Your DA. We are starting from ground zero with voters. Voters, like I said, they don't know anything about this elected official. They don't even know that the DA is an elected official. So we wanted to start from square one, which is we want to introduce people to their district attorney. And we want to do so in a way that acknowledges that, unlike us, who are criminal justice reformers and quite frustrated with how the DAs have been operating in California, the vast majority of voters coming to this issue simply don't know that. They assume that their elected district attorney is representing their values. So we have to get to that place through a narrative arc, which is what we've tried to do with this website. The first thing is simply defining what a DA is. And here this is our first opportunity to challenge this narrative that district attorneys send people to prison and that's their job. We actually want to say district attorneys are more than just prosecutors. The district attorney's job is to seek justice, to work to prevent crime, and serve as a leader in the diverse communities they represent. Next, we talk about power. What makes a DA so powerful? They have tremendous power to impact the lives of people, families, and communities. And then we wanted to put this in context of issues that people care about. So we've kind of looked at all, youth, police, mass incarceration, mental illness, substance abuse, equal treatment, and immigration. And we wanted to paint a picture of discretion with these scenarios. We wanted to say, in each of these scenarios, the district attorney has the power to make this decision or make this decision, right? And so we wanted to paint a picture of kind of a decision that would represent a tough on crime district attorney versus a district attorney who is more open to innovative solutions to crime and safety. So for instance, in youth, all young people make mistakes. Your DA can push a young person into the criminal justice system, or they can give them a second chance to learn from their mistakes. So once we've kind of painted this picture of prosecutorial discretion and put it into the context of issues people care about, then this is the point where we start talking about California's DAs. And this is where we introduce people to the idea that their district attorney may not be representing the will of their constituents. And we do this in the context of ballot measures, which are really the only official action that we have right now of our district attorneys. Unlike legislators, DAs do not take official actions. They do in individual cases, but they don't vote on legislation, for instance. So what we did for purposes of this campaign is we went back to Prop 36, all the way to Prop 64, and we researched the official public positions each of the district attorneys took on these ballot measures, and we compared them to how their county voted. And as you can see here, the DAs really were opposing all the ballot measures while Californians were supporting them.
So we only got about 1 more minute.
Oh, thank you. So, see, I knew that wouldn't be enough time. Okay, so anyway, I am going to stop here on the website. I encourage you all to look through the website. There's a lot of great stuff, and we're open to feedback since we just started. The other piece I just wanted to share with you all is on the pipeline end of things, in partnership with Smart Justice California, who you'll be hearing from Ann in a second, and other legal organizations. We are launching a series called Help Wanted: Prosecutors to Change the World. And here we have 4 events scheduled, as you can see. And the goal of these events is to reach out to law students and lawyers, kind of with a progressive edge, if you will, to really to kind of spark a conversation in the legal community that prosecutors can be change agents. And we want to bring in prosecutors that kind of exemplify this, like San Francisco District Attorney George Gascon, for instance, State's Attorney Kim Fox, who I mentioned earlier, she's going to come to California. Beth McCann, who's the newly elected Denver District Attorney, is also coming to California to talk to our folks and kind of spark this conversation that we need more diversity in prosecutors' offices, both in terms of who people are and as well as the values that they bring to the table. And that is the next important phase in our efforts to end mass incarceration in California. So that's happening. I'm very excited about that. And then I guess I'll stop there since I think I've run out of time. I'm very happy to answer questions, and I apologize for doing that so quickly. But back to you, Catherine.
Great, thanks so much, Anna. And there is a question for you in the queue, so if you could be ready to answer that in the Q&A at the end. But I'm just going to move on and move to Tamisha. And Tamisha, you started Safe Return Project, and it's a group of formerly incarcerated individuals, and you're working on behalf of returning citizens. Tell us more about, the work that Safe Return does, as well as your efforts to engage in the DA process in neighboring Contra Costa County.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Again, yes, my name is Tamisha Walker, founder and executive director of the Safe Return Project in Richmond and Contra Costa County. And I have been doing this work for probably about 6 years now. The mission of Safe Return is really just to end the mass incarceration of people of color and Black people everywhere, but specific to our county, and to re-enfranchise the disenfranchised with the knowledge of that people and whole communities are impacted and disenfranchised as a result of the carceral state. And the way we believe that we can re-enfranchise folks and also end mass incarceration is if we organize around narrative change, policies, infrastructure, and reinvestment. So divesting from the criminalization of people of color and Black people, and back into resources into our communities, where every individual can be whole and have equity. Everyone on our team and our staff is formerly incarcerated, including myself, which is why this work and the work of the Safe Return Project is so important to me. I've been home almost 8 years now from incarceration, and my first job opportunity was with Safe Return when I couldn't work because I had to identify that I had a felony. So I think that some of our accomplishments have really shifted, which is most important to us, the narrative around who is formerly incarcerated in our county. How should we be setting up systems of resources to make sure that people do not recidivate and that folks are not just not going back to jail, but are rebuilding, but also how our investment in the deep leadership of those folks to continue to drive significant change in areas where they see their communities are at a deficit. And so we have, the city of Richmond has passed at least 2 nationally progressive policies that have not just been advocated for, but also informed and drafted and pushed by formerly incarcerated folks in the city of Richmond to reduce barriers to housing and employment. We have worked with different various organizations at the state level and also the federal level to continue to think about what does it mean to reduce these type of barriers around housing and employment, but also knowing that folks also face other disadvantages. Currently, right now, we're working with Californians for Safety and Justice, looking at the 4,800 collateral consequences of any conviction in the state of California, and it's really opening up our eyes around how our work really needs to expand to really create a lot more change. I know folks are probably thinking, so why district attorneys? And so I think as a formerly incarcerated person, but also working for an organization that is deeply invested in building power for those impacted by the criminal justice system, it is very important that we be involved, if not leading these type of conversations in our county. My experience since I've been home, having conversations with district attorneys has been of how dehumanizing and invisible the process could make you feel as a defendant, and how can we change that, but also how can we also end like the disproportionate sentencing of people of color and Black people in our county, especially when what people really need are services and treatment and intervention and prevention. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to be at this table with the ACLU and other partners from across the state. Contra Costa County has led a lot around criminal justice reform, and it's mostly because people directly impacted have been engaged and awake and leading over the last 6 years as a result of the Safe Return Project. So, we've engaged currently over 1,000 residents across our county in this conversation around district attorneys, and we haven't had a lot of time, but moving forward, I'm very encouraged that we can win prosecutorial accountability and also a different face around district attorneys to represent our people in our county. So thank you all for inviting me to this space, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.
Thank you so much, Tamisha. And I'm going to move to Ann Irwin now, founder and executive director of Smart Justice California, which is a new C4 facing candidate or C4 candidate facing organization. Ann, can you tell us more about Smart Justice as well as your candidate recruitment efforts around the state?
Yes, and Catherine, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you all virtually. I'm Ann Irwin. I am in a building where there is construction happening outside, so hopefully you're not hearing it as loudly as I am. I am the founder of Smart Justice California. Our mission is straightforward, but also sort of incredibly timely. We work to elect candidates in California at the local and state level who support and promote and even champion meaningful criminal justice reform. And of course, included in this group are district attorneys. Before I quickly sort of go over the district attorney work that Smart Justice is doing, I really want to echo both Tamisha and Anna, who talked about how important and central the prosecutor is to the movement to end mass incarceration. San Francisco, for example, where George Gascon is the prosecutor, and before him, Kamala Harris, San Francisco sends fewer people to prison by far than any other county in California. And that is largely because of the policies that have implemented by the elected DA. So if we were in a world where there were George Gascons up and down the state, it's undeniable that our state prison population would drop significantly. And that's not even to mention a number of other really sort of meaningful reform policies that would be taking effect across the state, not just in San Francisco. The power of the prosecutor also plays out in Sacramento. So I have been over the last 2 weeks on the phone with state legislators, begging and pleading them to support a couple of pieces of sentencing reform legislation that are coming up for a vote. And I can't tell you how often I hear the refrain when talking to legislators, well, my DA says that this bill would, and you can fill in the blank. I even had one legislator read for me from the email that he received from his local DA, really slamming one of these pieces of legislation. Legislators listen to their local prosecutors. If we had a cohort of prosecutors up and down the state who supported reform legislation, the message that would be sent to legislators who are voting on proposed bills would be much, much different and much more open to reform and doing things differently. So that's the important state level interplay. We need to elect a cohort of DAs that will support George Gascon. He sits alone literally and figuratively at DA association meetings. We can change that. We can get him some support, and we can get a different message coming out of the DA's association. So Smart Justice, the way that we're getting involved in and diving in the 2018 DA races and beyond is largely we're holding the mantle of candidate recruitment. So little attention has been paid over the years to prosecutor races, except for sort of some anomalies here and there. But by and large, these races come and go in counties with little fanfare. So part of our work is to get boots on the ground in counties across California and start to plant seeds with folks who had never really thought about running for DA, progressive lawyers who, when we talk to them, I can't tell you how often we talk to folks and say, hey, we're looking for good, progressive, reform-minded candidates to run to be your DA in your county. And people will look at us and say, DA, hadn't really thought about it before. So part of this is really planting seeds, putting the DA position on the radar of folks who are interested in elected politics. And then also turning over stones, connecting with the local groups on the ground, the folks on the list that Anna showed you, labor groups, faith-based groups, other invested local entities who care about the DA position and are affected by what their local DA does. So we get ourselves into the counties and start talking to folks to figure out, is there a good progressive candidate in this county that we can support, get resources for, get them inspired to run. I mean, that's a threshold issue. And then, endorse them and support them through the end of the election. If talking to folks, the single biggest hurdle to having a critical mass of progressive DAs in California is finding candidates. And so that's really the work that we're doing as we speak. There are a couple of open seats, one in San Diego, one in Contra Costa, where a DA has resigned before the election. And so we're advocating and getting involved in the open seat appointment process at the local level. Of course, whoever the Board of Supervisors for a county appoints will affect the election that comes later hugely. So we're trying to get a good progressive folks appointed during that appointment process. There are a lot of entities, and this is the good news, there are a lot of entities from across the country and across the state who are excited about prosecutor races, and so are coming to get involved in these races and see the potential for real reform to come out of these races. So we are also trying to help play a clearinghouse role and coordinate the different entities who are coming in to want to participate in these races in a meaningful way. And finally, really the long-term work is, and Anna talked about this and is a partner with us in this, is the pipeline work. We have not created or built a pipeline of candidates. That's part of the reason that I show up in a county and ask folks if they want to run for DA, and they look at me strangely. So part of that is changing the paradigm that exists in law schools today, which is that if you are a progressive and you are interested in criminal work, you go on to become a public defender or a criminal defense lawyer, and if you are more law and order minded and want to do criminal work, then you go on to become a district attorney. And we need to change that paradigm. And that's really part of building a pipeline of candidates, so that every time there is this election cycle in California, we aren't scrambling to find candidates and turning over stones and nudging folks. Instead, we've got this robust pipeline of folks who are interested in this position and excited about it. So part of that pipeline work is events like the Help Wanted series, but also working with partners on a curriculum for law schools and bringing law schools into the mix as we develop the curriculum, so that we can help at that very sort of beginning place for lawyers. So much of your philosophy and ideology and approach to your work is shaped in law school. And so being able to get into the law schools and develop a good curriculum that helps shift the paradigm there. That's the work of Smart Justice right now in this exciting time for DA races, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks so much, Anne. And I'm just going to move to our last panelist, Nicole Boucher, who's been doing some great organizing with the California Donor Table and Progressive Air Project. And Nicole, can you talk more about how we're all working together in California and what opportunities there are for funders to plug into this work?
Sure. Thanks for everyone for joining me. Can you hear me, Catherine?
Yes.
Terrific. Great. So I'll start by just giving you all a very quick overview of the California Donor Table, We're a statewide community of C3 and C4 donors and foundations making aligned philanthropic investments in communities, organizations, coalitions, as well as progressive candidates. We use all political giving vehicles to advance progressive change. These types of investments range from nonpartisan civic engagement efforts to building the capacity of orgs to engage in partisan candidate work, to candidate endorsements and contributions. And just quickly, concretely, what that's looked like is over the past 8 years, we've worked in partnership with a group of foundations, labor, and other partners to build C3, C4 civic engagement tables in places in California with a large and growing new majority community. So places like San Diego, the Inland Empire, Orange County, and most recently some work in Contra Costa County. So our vision is that all voters in California, particularly communities of color, are registered, fully informed on both candidates and issues, and vote up and down the ballot. That our communities are electing those that represent their values and needs and have opportunities to govern and hold accountable. And that we have a pipeline of progressive candidates that reflect the values of the communities that they're representing. So the work that's been described to you from the other panelists, really we saw as a perfect storm to engage in California. So the lanes have pretty much with how we're working together. So Anna and the ACLU, as they've described, great nonpartisan efforts around the state, groups like Safe Return and Tamisha doing the nonpartisan engagement around meeting your DA, educating folks on the ground. And then Smart Justice and some other folks doing the work to, build a pipeline and find candidates that can run these races. So what we saw as a place that we could potentially fill in is really looking at these races with an eye toward what's the power building potential on the ground. And as we started looking around the state at some of these races, what we found very quickly was that there were no criminal justice focus groups in California that were doing candidate work. And out of those, very few of them had a C4 and also had interest in doing that work, but weren't quite sure how to navigate it. So Tides Advocacy Fund and California Donor Table have been working across the state to identify groups that have that interest to build that political opportunity on the ground. And it was a bit of a surprise when we looked to say, wow, there's so few groups doing criminal justice work, but there's been all of this great work happening around the state with ballot initiatives. And what we found was that a lot of the groups were engaging in the ballot initiatives. And so things like Prop 47, right? A great ballot initiative that passed with great incentive. You saw from Anna's slide how many of those DAs supported it. So you can also imagine how many of those DAs are working to implement it. So I think it was 2 out of 58. And we're looking to, really engage the groups on the ground to think through that power building strategy and what could be possible on the ground. Another thing that we noticed is in campaigns, many of the equity and race-centered groups have not been doing partisan work. So we've been working to support some of those groups on the ground because we want this type of knowledge that campaign consultants often bring in to a community to leverage a candidate. They often leave with that. And our question is, well, what is left on the ground when this campaign is over, and who's going to have the deep relationship with this newly elected district attorney to be able to connect and help hold accountable? And just wanted to put a pin in, really what this particular political moment in time is, for, C3, for your information only, but there's a number of C4 funders here that we know that the path to the House with the vulnerable congressional seats are in California. A lot of those overlap with some of the biggest races in San Diego, Orange County, and some other areas. So really taking the framing from one of our anchor donors, Steve Phillips, from Brown is the New White, looking at organizing strategies as ways to mobilize our communities. DAs are closer to communities on the ground that are impacted, probably 10 to 1 to what a congressional seat is. And we see this opportunity as huge for communities to be engaging and also having their vote count and also being at the table in the partisan sense as well. So just some of the ways that we're working together and opportunities to partner. I mean, I think that what we're looking at, all of us as panelists working together, is that there's a critical ecosystem for success. We've seen this from other races around the country that Anna highlighted. You know, they're definitely, for funders to plug in, there's definitely deep in need for C3 engagement strategies. I would guess that all of you on the phone that are funding criminal justice groups can probably name 5 to 6 groups that have 1 staff person or less, but are doing incredible work around the state. You know, C3, on the C3 side, there's incredible pieces around candidate forums, values-based canvassing, voter engagement efforts. Smart Justice can certainly use a lot of help as well in terms of candidate recruitment and development efforts. You see the challenges that they're faced with even finding and recruiting candidates. So on the C4 side, there's that opportunity. And really from our end, what we and Tides Advocacy Fund are seeing are the power building strategies for the criminal justice groups. And just want to first note that there are currently 0 resources out there for groups on the ground to do partisan candidate work in this space. So we're happy to answer any questions and engage in any conversations and questions you all have. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicole, and to all of you. That was a really helpful overview. Now we're going to move into the Q&A, and just a reminder that after this Q&A, there will be a funder-only sandbox. So this won't end at 2:15, but we have 15 minutes, and I noticed that there are already some questions in the queue. So Monique and Karen, I'm wondering if it's maybe possible to unmute Melanie and Gidan's lines, and perhaps they can just ask their questions to the panelists.
Sure.
Great. And I know there are a couple that are for you specifically, Anna, asking about ACLU's partnerships. And I believe the one from Melanie is also about how ACLU is deciding what grassroots organizations to partner with.
Sorry.
Do you want me to answer the questions, or I'm sorry, was somebody?
Well, great. So here, I'll just go ahead and ask, or because I don't know, is Gidan, is your line unmuted? Would you like to ask your question yourself?
It looks like Gidan doesn't have a microphone.
Oh, okay.
Participants should be able to unmute themselves, but otherwise maybe we can just read off the question for them.
Okay, great. So Gidan had a question. She asked, which organization in the JRC got the re-grant from ACLU? What is the scale of the resources and what is the gap? So that's for you, Anna.
Okay, great. Thanks. Very good question. So just so everyone knows, the JRC is the Alameda-based group, the Justice Reinvestment Coalition, which is a coalition that was erected, I believe, in 2014. I might be wrong about that, but it's a group. It's a coalition of about 11 organizations in Alameda County that all get together to set an agenda for local reform, criminal justice issues. So, you know, the JRC was one of the first groups we went to in Alameda County because they are well established, and they well established both in the work that they do as well as the infrastructure of the coalition. So they have a fiscal sponsor, which is Urban Strategies Council. So we issued the grant was received by Urban Strategies Council. However, it is being allocated towards the project itself. And the project itself, the Prosecutor Project, is primarily being staffed by Prince White from Urban Peace Movement, which is a member of the coalition, as well as Mar Velez, who is from Courage in Oakland. So those are the two people that we primarily interact with when it comes to the Alameda work. But I just want to reinforce that the Justice Reinvestment Coalition in Alameda County is well established. They work well together, and they have governance and all that and all that in place already, so they can actually, you know, create a campaign plan and implement it. What is the scale of resources? So we were able to issue these subgrants in these 11 counties as a result of a very generous grant from Open Philanthropy. We got a $250,000 grant for last year, or I guess this year, excuse me. And we allocated $200,000 of that grant directly back into these partners. And we reserved $50,000 for ACLU to fund the website, and also we see our role as continuing to provide tools, resources to the local groups as they need. So for instance, if Tamisha's like, hey, Anna, can you issue a Public Records Act request to the DA's office to get X, Y, or Z information? That's something that we can take on, or other communication support trainings, etc. So that's kind of the allocation. In terms of gap, this is the most common question I get. What else is needed? And how I answer that is there's a lot more that these organizations need because they are doing work every day. They have been, and they often run on a shoestring budget. And I would really like to change that. So I don't have exact numbers right now, but the network, we are working together right now to implement their campaign plans. And we are also working together to identify what are the gaps, and if more resources were available, what more could these groups do, which I think is a lot more, but I don't have an exact kind of outline of what that looks like yet. But I assure you, Tamisha and I and the rest of the members will be back with a more formalized plan of what the gaps are.
Great, thanks, Anna. And this could be either for you or for Tamisha or for any of the panelists, really. But Jidan also wants to know, how much would you estimate is needed to win a DA race in C4 funding, and using Contra Costa as an example? And then what are the strategies right now to raise that money? And it looks like specifically she's asking, like, how can we help as a foundation that does not fund candidate races, but they do fund C4 up to their limit for ballot measures?
I'm happy to answer, but I kind of feel like, Anne, maybe you should take that on first, since you're the organization that can do that, and also Nicole.
Great. So DA races, the cost of DA races varies wildly, and the effort that we're describing, the effort that's coalescing in California for 2018 and hopefully for election cycles to come, is new. So we don't really have a precedent to look back on and say, this is how much a contested race in X county typically costs. I can tell you specifics about, what it costs to do intensive candidate recruitment. That's really just getting personnel. We have right now Irene, who's also on the call, who's been incredible, Irene Sue, who is the boots on the ground. But we could use 3 more Irenes so that we could be in 3 times as many counties recruiting candidates. In Contra Costa specifically, because the process is beginning as an open seat appointment, Irene is leading up the effort to really press the Board of Supervisors to appoint a really good progressive person to fill the vacant seat there. If we lose that battle, we will of course then turn to the June election in Contra Costa. But right now, Contra Costa it's really about having a central person who's able to do the C4 work, because this is squarely candidate work, in advocating for a particular person to be appointed. And some of the tools that she's been employing is holding candidate forums and making sure that local partners are there, as well as supervisors, so the decision makers are actually hearing what the community cares about and the questions that they're asking of the potential appointees. And then lobbying the supervisors, making sure that groups on the ground have a voice, and they're a vehicle for expressing that voice to their supervisors. That's what's happening in Contra Costa right now. That appointment is expected to happen this week. So the C4 money, I know, Jidan, you also asked a question about sort of where is this money coming from, and the C4 money to do candidate work is coming from individuals. As we've done in California Criminal Justice Funders context, and can do again individually or as a group, there are a lot of ways to do C4 funding, and we've got the Tides or Advocacy Fund folks on the phone as well, and can help if folks are interested in doing C4 funding, reach out and talk to Tides, reach out and talk to other folks who can advise you on whether you can do the funding, and if you can, how.
Mhm. And this is Anna again. I just wanted to give a little bit more context about the cost of races. Just,
Yeah.
I think it's helpful. So Anne's absolutely right. Like, not only do we not have kind of a knowledge base for California, the fact is very few races in California, district attorney races in California history have been contested races. So not only do we not have like a knowledge base, there's, you know, this is not something that has happened. These particular elected officials haven't really been funded yet. So there's, you know, we really don't know what's going to happen. But what we do know is that typically our opposition in these, which is law enforcement, has a lot of money. So the big question that I have in all of this work is, what is the Prison Guards Union going to do? What is the Peace Officer Association going to do? Are they going to step in and fund local DA and maybe sheriff candidates once they see our investment and engagement on these issues? So that's a big question mark that I have. But for a little more context, the Philly district attorney race, so Philadelphia has a population of 1.5 million people, and George Soros was one of the primary funders of Larry Krasner's campaign, and they invested 1.45 million in the race. So a population of 1.5 million. I'm sorry, I don't know how many registered voters there are in Philly off the top of my head, but 1.5 million population and 1.4 million spent. So these are not going to be cheap races, but every race is going to be different. Some races are going to have many candidates running. Some races are just going to have two. It's really a big question mark how this is going to play out, but I just wanted to provide that context of the Philly race.
Yeah, and just to add on that, or just clarification, when Soros gets involved, or if any of us were to write a check to support a particular candidate directly, that is actually a different category of funding. That's a direct political contribution, so it's distinct even from C4 funding. So I just wanted to sort of make sure that distinction is out there, that C4 work is not actually directly writing checks to or giving money directly to campaigns.
Hi, this is Nicole. So just wanting to add one more point to that. You know, what we've seen at the California donor table is that you can run races, you know, they are different races, different seats in California, but the ground game can make a huge difference. So investing in groups on the ground, I think you can see all of the work that's been done out there and some of the research around top-down races and the kinds of results you get and what you actually get when you have organizing strategy on the ground. Those groups have to have partisan status to be able to engage in the candidate races. So once these candidates declare, they will have to be very, you know, those that are doing the C3 work with this ACLU will also have to tread very lightly and be very careful about how they do, you know, values-based canvassing as opposed to direct campaigning on the ground.
Yeah, we've thrown out the term candidate-facing C4 organization, and I just want to make sure that that's clear for folks. So right now, within our movement, the criminal justice movement in California, there is not a single organization on the ground that takes a position on candidates. In other words, there is not a single organization, not SE Justice Group, not any of these beloved groups who are doing incredible work. None of them are in a position to be able to say, we support so-and-so for district attorney, or we oppose so-and-so for district attorney. And in the context of these races, it's going to be hugely important for groups on the ground in counties to be able to take positions on candidates, to support or oppose a candidate. And that's C4 work. And so one of perhaps the biggest thing holding these groups back from being able to do this important candidate work is funding, is C4 funding. So in terms of needs and C4 needs, building out the C4 capacity of groups who are working in counties This is a huge moment for our movement right now to really seed this ecosystem of groups on the ground in these counties who can explicitly oppose or support candidates who are running.
Awesome. Thanks so much, all. And I want to close with one question, but I also just want to note, Melanie, I see your question about why there's not anybody specifically in LA County. So Anna, I just want, or any of the panelists wondering if you can follow up with Melanie about that. But I wanted to close with this one question from Anuja, and thanks, Chris, for putting that in there. So maybe everyone can kind of have 30 seconds really quickly in our final 2 minutes. But what are some key investment recommendations for funders who are new to this work?
I can start. This is Anna on the 501c3 side, which is actually dovetails into Melanie's question. We have a lot more counties that we need to add into the mix, including the obvious elephant in the room, which Melanie pointed out. LA County is currently not part of the network, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of which is just a recognition that LA County is large. And there are many, many incredible organizations that do criminal justice work in different capacities. And right off the bat, I acknowledge that Los Angeles was going to have to be on a different track in order to go in there and and take the time to do the organizing and coalition building and relationship building that is needed to do this work. In addition, LA County is on a different election cycle, so they won't have a district attorney race until 2020. So on the 501c3 side, it would be additional capacity to not only give more resources to the current network organizations, but to grow our network to include all of the large counties in California, and some of the other key counties that we want to do some work in. So that's from me.
Hi, this is Nicole, California Donor Table. So again, as I mentioned, there's currently 0 investments made, and Anne also made that point, in groups on the ground, and many of them do not have C4 status at all. So we're partnering with Tides, who is helping out with the administrative piece, because a lot of these groups don't have the capacity to do the administrative piece. But what's needed first and foremost is resources to be able to resource these groups to engage in partisan strategies.
Mm-hmm. And this is Anne, Smart Justice. I just echo in the near term, a great investment recommendation is C4 groups at the local level, at the state level. Our ability to win these races, Anna is helping create fertile soil for these races. Once races get underway, our ability to win is going to turn on having C4 candidate work happening at the state level and locally on the ground. In the long term, over on the horizon, and this is 501c3 funding recommendation, is investing in pipeline work so that in future election cycles, we actually can tap a pipeline that we've cultivated over the years of great progressive reform-minded candidates.
Hello, this is Tamisha with Safer Turn. I guess I would say that in Contra Costa County, there is a C3, C4 table being developed because all of us here on the ground recognize that we need to be in communication when it comes to this type of work. I would say that C3 funding is really important to build a capacity of criminal justice groups who are on the ground, who have been doing the work of building the base and the narrative so that C4 folks getting into the fight can have something to glean from. I guess one of my recommendations would be that an increase in the capacity for C3 organizations to think about what would it mean to actually have C4 capacity as well, since we are already leading the work on the ground. I think also technical assistance has been amazing from Irene from Smart Justice. So just thinking about increasing those type of resources as well could help us be really successful here in Contra Costa specifically, but I think it might also help in other places.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, Anna, Tamisha, Ann, and Nicole. Thank you so much. And the last thing we want to do just before we move into the funder sandbox is just do one last poll question. So Monique and Karen, if you could administer the very final poll. And basically, we just want to ask you, would you like someone to follow up with you? Whether you're someone who's been doing this already, and maybe you just have some questions, about either how to expand your support or get other folks involved, or if you're someone who's new to this, if you would like someone to follow up with you, then just let us know and we'll make sure that someone follows up with you. Again, thank you to our panelists as well as to all of our attendees. We're incredibly grateful. And now we're going to move into the funder sandbox, and I will pass it over to you, Monique.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Catherine, and to all of our amazing speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time for this panel and for this webinar. So thank you. For those of you funders who have not been part of our meetings and webinars in the past, one of the things we like to do at our meetings is what we call the funder sandbox, and it's a chance for funders to give updates, to talk about updates about their work, about their campaigns that they're funding that they think others will be interested in, and then upcoming events or meetings. And so as I think Karen mentioned earlier, is that you are able to unmute yourself in order to participate in this part of the meeting. And so I will actually, I had asked Caitlin Krieger if she could give us an update on the bail reform work. And so I'm wondering, Caitlin, if you would be willing to give us a little bit of an update. As many of you know, we did a webinar about bail reform in March. And so I thought perhaps Caitlin could kick us off, and then we'd love to hear from others as well. Looks like she's trying to unmute. So there should be, if you move your cursor, you'll see a toolbar, and there should be a way. There we go. There we go. Hello?
So the
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hooray. Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So bail reform in California has been hot and heavy over the last several months. When we last checked in, I believe it was before anything had gone to a vote. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for those of you who, I might just do a quick 3-minute review for folks who are on the line who might not be familiar with what's going on. But there is currently legislation in the California state legislature to reform the way that pretrial justice and money bail are applied in our courts throughout the state. The current system relies very, very heavily on the use of cash bail, which has resulted in the pretrial incarceration of tens of thousands of Californians who would likely be released if it were not for the amount of money that they would have to pay. You know, there's a large social justice, you know, reason why we want to reform this. If families are being broken up by parents who are being arrested and incarcerated before their trial. But one of the interesting things about bail reform is it's not just about the incarceration time that people serve before they go to trial. One of the things that we have learned through research conducted throughout the country is that tend to have much heavier sentences and longer sentences relative to people who are not incarcerated, partly because when you're not in jail before your trial, you have the ability to fight your case. Another major component of this is the fact that when somebody is incarcerated before trial, the prosecutor has a lot of leverage over that individual when trying to negotiate a plea bargain. So you end up with a lot of folks deciding that they will take a guilty plea rather than fighting their case in order to get out of jail. And often the individuals who take this guilty plea may not be aware of or feel like they have to accept the long-term consequences of a criminal record on job and housing opportunities that they might have in the future. This is not a simple fight. The bail industry, which typically will help people pay bail if they pay a 10% non-refundable fee, the bail industry sees that this legislation would most likely put them out of business in the state of California. And they are definitely fighting this tooth and nail. And so when we wrote up legislation, and I'll just say quickly what the legislation does, it shifts the current system from being one that's predominantly based on wealth, how much money somebody has, deciding whether or not they'll get out of jail before their trial. It shifts it to a system of real risk and needs. So this legislation calls for the use of a pretrial assessment to determine whether or not somebody is likely to show up at court and whether or not that person is at all posing a risk to public safety. Based on that pretrial assessment, individuals will be given the kind of least restrictive conditions for release. In many cases, this means they'll be released on their own recognizance. In some cases, it means they might have to check in with somebody who would be similar to a parole or a probation officer. And in some cases, it means that individuals will be detained if they do pose a major flight risk or risk to public safety. So that's the brief summary of this legislation. It was introduced much earlier this year, 2 bills that were identical, AB 42 in the Assembly and SB 10 in the Senate, went to a vote in early June. SB 10, the Senate bill, did pass. It's sponsored by Senator Hertzberg, but AB 42 did not pass. So what happened over the summer is that SB 10 went back to the Assembly and has been in negotiations all summer over potential amendments that would allow more Assembly members to come on board and vote for this bill. A couple weeks ago, the governor came out and said that he was really excited to support bail reform as well, but he didn't feel that the bill in its current form was solid enough and developed enough for him to sign. So he and Senator Hertzberg put out a joint press release saying that they would collaborate on getting to a version of this bill that the governor could sign and that more people in the Assembly would support. Those negotiations are now happening, and the bill will go to the Assembly floor probably early next year. This announcement happened about a week and a half ago, and so the coalition of groups involved with the bail reform effort are still determining what the ideal strategy is for them moving forward. But one thing we do know is that there is, now that we have a little more time, there is an increased role for grassroots organizations to play to put pressure on Assembly members to switch their vote. I'm gonna stop there with that update and maybe see if there's questions. I'm trying to view the chat area. Let's see. Is it possible to see the chat area when I'm unmuted?
It is. You just have to move the cursor and you can see the toolbar. I don't currently see any questions in the chat box, but perhaps, Caitlin, if you want to share your contact info, folks could send you questions offline as well.
Absolutely. Yes, and I should also mention that the coalition is regrouping now that we have this new agreement between the governor and Senator Hertzberg, and is going to be identifying some key opportunities for funders to plug in to the next iteration of this work. They're still in the process of figuring out kind of what the best strategy is, but I do know that there will be some opportunities for people to engage, for funders to engage, and to help influence the positive outcome of this campaign.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Caitlin. I next wanted to just ask Anuja to give a plug for a webinar that we have coming up that's being hosted by the Criminal Justice Funders Group on October 23rd.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There's a bit of an echo.
Sorry about the echo.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm not sure, Anuja, if that was a issue with the...
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. Oh, hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm hearing an echo still. Can you?
Yes, I'm not sure if that's perhaps because you're using a phone or the computer is interfering.
Yeah, perhaps you could do the update.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a webinar being planned for October 23rd. It will be in person if you're in the Bay Area at the Northern California Grantmakers offices, or it will be available by Zoom also if you are not local or you're not able to attend local. And so I unfortunately do not have the description of the webinar in front of me, but I will send out a update with the description about the webinar as well as the location and time and an RSVP with that. And Anuja, if you wanted to just type into the chat a little bit about the content for the webinar, that's also an option. Otherwise, I will send an email out with that as well. We are actually at time. Are there any other kind of last updates or things that folks wanted to quickly share with each other? I haven't seen anything in the chat box. I will say, Karen, if you could move to the next slide. Just quickly, while folks are thinking about if there's anything else they want to say, is that, as I mentioned, that this is a network of funders, and we welcome new members to join at any time. If you'd like to get involved, I will send out an invitation to join the California Criminal Justice Funders listserv, which we hope you will join. We also welcome funders to propose webinars that they think would be interesting for their fellow funders. And so that's something, I will send out a form that you can fill out that gives us a sense of how you'd want to structure the webinar and the content that you're proposing. And so that will also go out, and we encourage folks to propose meeting webinars as well, webinars or meeting content. And then we will be planning another in-person meeting. We are tentatively thinking it will be in December, mid-December, and in Southern California. And so we also welcome folks to join us in planning that meeting. Again, all of that will go out in an email as a follow-up to this call. And so you'll have different options of getting involved, staying involved. And those of you who did indicate that you'd like to learn more about the prosecutorial accountability work, we will let the speakers know and have them follow up with you about that as well. So thank you for filling out that poll. We will be sure to encourage them to follow up with you. So thank you all for your participation. We welcome any feedback or suggestions for future webinars. And again, please join our listserv and stay in touch. Okay, thank you all. And thank you, Karen, for putting that on, putting that up.